mira ahora. Mira el pique de Mikel Arteta, que se vuelve loco contra el banquillo de Jurgen Klopp.
Bueno, esto no lo habíamos visto nunca. Este enfrentamiento entre Arteta y Klopp.
Pero Arteta está encendidísimo, ¡Mamma mía! Pero sigue un poquito el trash talking,
This is Arsecast Extra.
Hello and welcome to another Arsecast Extra, as always, with James from Gutterblog. James, good morning to you.
Good morning, Andrew. How you doing?
I'm all right, thanks. I'm okay. Bit of a disappointing weekend, has to be said.
Yeah, I was hoping they'd keep Solskjaer in a job too.
Yeah.
But, you know, sometimes results don't go your way.
I have to say I am a bit upset by that, to be honest, because he is somebody I've always really disliked. I don't buy his angel face, baby face kind of look at me, I'm a nice guy thing. I don't buy it. I don't buy into that at all. So I really wanted him to stay in a job where it just was never going to go well for him, as a kind of purgatory for the rest of his days. And obviously there were benefits for us as well. But there you go. These things happen.
Yeah, he's beloved by United fans.
I mean, I get that. Like, I understand that. I obviously amn't. I am not.
I amn't one.
No,
nor I don't see it. In fact, I've been sort of surprised by the degree to which he's loved, if you see what I mean. Like, there's been this big outpouring of affection. Although I guess it's like when somebody dies to an extent.
Yeah, it's the old
like Arsene Wenger says in the documentary.
Yeah, it's this kind of thing, the don't speak ill of the dead sort of thing. Even if someone was like a dreadful bastard their whole lives, and at the funeral, at the wake or whatever it is, people are standing around going, he wasn't that bad, really, was he? And actually he was a prick his whole life. But there you go. Yeah, it's a bit like that. It all felt a bit performative or something, this sort of outpouring of sympathy. Poor guy, you got to feel sorry for him. No, I don't feel sorry for him at all. I feel sorry for us. I feel sorry for football that he's been sacked. But there you go.
Yeah, a real shame. Listen, I think we can just hope that Michael Carrick goes on a decent run at some point after we've played them and lands himself with a 3-year contract or something like that. Yeah,
Rio Ferdinand bigging him up on BT Sport. Mickey C's at the wheel or something like that.
Please, but not until after, what is it, December 2nd when we play them.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a little way in the future, and we've got to talk about the past. That's why we're here. We're here to talk about what happened at the weekend. Arsenal went to Anfield and lost. And lost convincingly, unfortunately. Handsome. We lost
handsome 4-0 defeat.
Oh, God. I have to say I'm slightly... How do I feel about this? Like, there's a logical part of me and an emotional part of me. And the logical part of me is understanding of the fact that we lost to one of the best teams in Europe right now, one of the best teams in the world, and have been for quite some time. The emotional part of me is unhappy that we lost in the manner in which we lost. And I think we had said maybe last week, what we want to see when Arsenal go to Anfield is a team that's competitive, that doesn't get turned over, that even if you lose, you give a good account of yourselves. And I find it hard to take a 4-0 scoreline and take away those slight positive vibes we might have got from that kind of performance, while at the same time acknowledging that I thought the first half wasn't that bad and at times was quite decent from an Arsenal perspective. So I'm a bit all over the place with this one.
Okay, well that's all right. That's what we're here to talk about.
We'll
I said
chat
that like a counsellor.
Hang on, I'm just going to lie down here.
Get on the Arsenal couch, and we'll rattle through this. I mean, I feel responsible because when we were talking about the game last week, I remember saying it would be great if we were in it at half time, and I forgot about the second half. In it at full time would have been a more sensible thing to ask for.
I knew where you were coming from, though, because, sometimes you can get blown away in the opening stages of these games, and then the second half is just redundant anyway.
The problem is I sort of got my wish, we were in at half-time, and it all kind of went wrong. I mean, I feel okay about it. That probably won't surprise anybody, but I'm sort of I think I'm able to see it for what it is, even if I did not like losing, and certainly by that scoreline. I have to say, I was very nervous going into the game. I felt on edge. I felt nervous, yeah.
That's what, maybe I'm just stupid, but I felt like cautiously optimistic is maybe too strong, but cautiously not as pessimistic as I thought I was going to be.
Well, I think the nerves may have been born of optimism. Do you know what I mean? Like, I thought, I was excited maybe to see what we might do or produce. And listen, we'll talk about the lineup in a moment, but when the game started, I have to be honest and say I was feeling pretty good for half an hour. Yeah. And so, yeah, it is quite the collapse. I watched it again yesterday.
Glutton for punishment.
Yeah, well, because it was so emphatic, the second half. I was like, I need to try and understand some of what happened there. And I've got some ideas. Okay. But let's go back to the beginning. What did you think of him keeping, not the same team, but the same team that played at Leicester? So
I thought there were a couple of decisions in terms of the team that he obviously had to think about. Thomas Partey was one, whether he was going to be fit enough to start or not, and I can understand why you would want Thomas Partey in the team from the start if you can get him there. I think we've got some questions about him, so I'm going to park that particular discussion until part 2. Because we do have some questions about Partey. Then there was
just on the fitness thing, by the way.
Yeah.
So I had heard a couple of days before the game that it looked very good for him. So I have to believe that purely from a fitness perspective, they were making an informed decision. Do you know what I mean? Like, the rustiness is a thing, but I think he was fit to play. Yeah,
he was in training and what have you. And, pre-game, I think he was trying to obfuscate a little bit about, who was going to be available and who wasn't. He does.
Loves that. It's then massively undercut by us putting out injury updates from the official website. It's like he doesn't know those are going on.
Yeah.
Don't tell Mikel that we published the team news the day before his press conference.
I know. I mean, look, it is what it is. He likes to do that. I don't know what benefit it really has to anybody. As I said on the preview podcast with Lewis, I don't think Partey's inclusion or exclusion would make any difference whatsoever to Jurgen Klopp in terms of how he set his team up and what way he would want them to play. So it's not like you're, going, aha, look, we've got him, and Jurgen Klopp all of a sudden is thrown into chaos and doesn't know what to do with the fact that Thomas Partey is there. But you said he was going to be out. I feel like I've been... It's not like that. I don't think that's the case. Lacazette and Odegaard was another decision I think he had to make. And the other very obvious one was Tierney or Tavares.
Yeah. And that was, I think, I think there was also a Sam B. Maitland-Niles decision, potentially.
Maybe, yeah.
And Tavares or Tierney, I think, was sort of maybe the biggest one in terms of the fact that, ordinarily you would think of Tierney as one of the first names on the team sheet, kind of thing. But Nuno had done very well.
He had, but I said before the game that I thought Tierney would start. I felt before the game that Tierney should start. So it's not kept in hindsight to say this. No. I agree that Nuno has done well in the last couple of weeks. I get the idea, you know what I mean, where a player's come in, he's done well, and it might feel like some kind of a punishment for him to be left on the bench for the next game, even though he's done ostensibly nothing wrong. But I also feel like when you go to Anfield, when you're playing against Liverpool, when you're going to be up against it, you pick your best team, and I think Kieran Tierney is our best left back, and I feel like that was a mistake. I'm not sure how much it would have had an impact on the overall game, to be honest. But maybe he doesn't make that mistake for the second goal. And I'm not being hugely critical of Nuno here. You know, he's an exciting player. He likes to try things. He drove the ball and then played a wonderful pass to Jota, to be fair. But I just wonder if at that point in the game, if you've got Tierney on the field rather than Tavares, a young player in a very early stage in his development, I just felt a game like this was just a step too far for him at this point.
Well, yeah, I think we both said we would have picked Tierney. And guess what? We were right this time, for once.
Yeah.
but yeah. Listen, I could understand it from both sides. With hindsight, it's kind of an easier decision, right?
Yeah.
I got it, and I was like, I was intrigued to see what we might do. And yeah, like I said, at the start, I was sort of vaguely encouraged by. We were doing something quite interesting with our shape. It occurred to me watching it again yesterday, where Jamie Carragher kind of talked about it on commentary about Saka being on Van Dijk. When Liverpool built it up, we sort of sat in like a 4-3-3. Smith Rowe joined Partey and Lokonga, and then Saka pushed right up high with Lacazette and Aubameyang, and you know, I think it was just to kind of match them up in build-up and try and stop them playing out. I mean, I don't want to overblow how we started. It's not like we threatened to score on multiple occasions and they didn't have a chance. As I recall, I think Ramsdale still made a few saves in that first half hour.
Oh, he did, yeah. I mean, there were signs that the pressure was beginning to mount on us simply because of the way Liverpool dominate possession. I think what's so impressive about them, and I said this on the blog on Sunday, is that like when they win the ball back, they have it under control instantly. And by that I mean they're organised. They're not trying to make 4 or 5 passes to get it under control, to get the ball down, to get people in position. Like they get it back off you and they're ready to go straight away. So it's a huge thing to try and deal with, I think, when you're the team defending against Liverpool, trying to stay organised yourself, trying to stay compact, trying to keep the shape. Where I felt we had some issues was when we did have possession, I felt like we were missing a man. And when they had possession, I felt like we were missing a man in midfield. And that's why maybe I would have played Odegaard rather than Lacazette. Again, it's one of those, I understand he hit on something which has kind of worked. I think Lacazette has had a reasonably positive impact. But I just felt like in a game like this, if we could tuck an extra midfielder into that central area, it would have given us maybe somebody to deal with Thiago dropping as deep as he did, picking up the ball and just spraying it around wherever he wanted. And when we had the ball, we just had that extra man, that extra body in there to try and exert a little more control in central areas, because pretty much for the whole game we had none. And that meant we couldn't get the ball wide to Smith Rowe and Saka as much as we would have liked. And our striker gets limited service. I know there's probably going to be some questions about Aubameyang as well, but yeah, it was a problem, I think, that lack of midfield control. And I think Odegaard in that position gives you more than Lacazette. Yeah,
but I do think that I don't know how he would have coped with the way Liverpool were playing either, genuinely. They were so focused on the centre of the pitch. I mean, you know, we will talk about Partey later, but in that middle part of the pitch, there was 4 or 5 Liverpool players most of the time. Like the way they press, the way they work, all that energy, all that running, it can look chaotic, but it is organised within an inch of its life, and it is so targeted. They also tell you where your weaknesses are in terms of where they're prepared to let you have the ball and not. Like I found it really interesting. I think Nuno had more touches than any other Arsenal player because they just would not let us play through the middle of the pitch. I think it was Nuno and Tomiyasu because they would not permit us to go centrally. And I Lacazette, I thought, had a really difficult day, and I just felt like, he's done well against Villa, he's done well to an extent against Leicester. I just felt that in Fabinho, he just came up against a player who was just better than him at everything.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Fabinho in that position is probably going to monster pretty much everybody you've got in there. I think the point about the fullbacks having more touches is really interesting, because at halftime, I don't know if you saw this when you picked it up again, when the teams were coming out, Arteta was in the tunnel giving some very specific instructions to Nuno and to Tomiyasu while the rest of the team was coming out. Yeah, they showed that on the TV. So
it was kind of incredible. Listen, this isn't a Liverpool podcast, so I don't want to praise them too much, but it is astonishing how quickly they regain possession, how much pressure they put you under in those areas. And there were times in the first half where we coped okay with that. There were a couple of moments where I remember us playing out from the back, Conga playing a couple of 1-2s and thinking, sort of being encouraged by the fact that even though it was difficult, we were still trying to play our game. I know maybe we did that too much later in the game, but I thought there was some courage in what we attempted to do. Even in Ben White, trying to dribble through the lines, he got tackled and it led to a chance. But I was like, well, they're not afraid to play, at least.
Yeah, I thought that was okay. I was fine with that. I know that some of the stuff that happened in the second half from our sloppiness in possession created pressure and gave Liverpool some chances. But, I don't think that's a huge... I don't think that was as much down... people have talked about the Liverpool press and how they press you and how they put pressure on you. I don't really think it was the Liverpool press that caused that sloppiness. I think it was us. We were architects of our own misfortune in those positions, because I think the players who made those errors are capable of much better than that, So you can say maybe it was Liverpool. I don't really think it was. I just think a little more concentration, being a bit too casual at times, and that's what caused the problem. So I had no real issue with us trying to play it out. And I think if we're going to try and play and we want to see this team compete, we're going to have to try and play against these teams as well.
I think so. That's my overriding feeling about the game, actually, that, I think when Mikel Arteta looks back at it, I think there'll be enormous frustration at particularly the first 2 goals that Arsenal conceded. I know there were other chances in the game before that, and the keeper made a few saves. But if you're going to go to Anfield and get anything, your keeper's going to make a few saves. Yeah. I think that's a given. I do think that there was a sloppiness about the first 2 that will really grate on the manager. Where do you stand on the kind of narrative of the touchline spat and that shifting the momentum of the game?
Look, there's no question it created some energy inside the stadium, because that's what happens when things like that go on, whether it's 2 players or whether it's 2 managers or whatever it might be. When you have that kind of an incident, the home crowd are going to get absolutely behind their side of things, right? Personally, I really don't have any issue with Mikel Arteta taking exception to what he clearly felt was a bad foul from Mane. Now, it wasn't really. I watched it again.
No.
And he doesn't do anything but keep his eyes on the ball. Maybe he goes up with his arms, but it's one of those, when you're jumping, your arms go up. I'm not defending Mane in any way. I have a suspicion that Arteta's reaction was based in some small part over what happened with Kieran Tierney last season, when Mane absolutely straight-armed him and should have been sent off in that game. Tomiyasu went down, and it did look as if Mane had caught him. So Arteta's reaction, I think, is one to protect his player, to go to bat for his player. I don't really have any problem with that at all. I think it's fine in the circumstances. In the end, it turns out there wasn't that big of a foul from Mane, which is why I think Klopp got as wound up as he did. But even if the crowd were more vocal, even if there was a bit more energy inside the stadium, I don't think that explains it doesn't really explain how poorly we defended the set piece. You know what I mean? Like, that's not what... Like, if they'd ripped us open and scored a couple of quick goals, fine. But that's not what happened. And I think we were... You know, you can say, well, Liverpool were more up for it, but, like, we had to respond to that energy too. You know what I mean? So it's not...
Yeah.
There were signs before that happened that Liverpool were beginning to turn the screw on us. They were beginning to find passes through midfield. Partey was bypassed a couple of times. Arteta went crazy on the sideline at one point. Yeah,
there was one, wasn't there, particularly?
Yeah, you know, so it was beginning to happen anyway. You can look at it in hindsight and say, well, maybe Arteta shouldn't have done it, and maybe if Liverpool hadn't been so wound up, they would. You know, I just think they're such a good team that you know, the goals probably would have come at some point anyway. So I've got no issue with it, really.
No, I have to be honest and say I loved it in the moment. Yeah. Like I love a bit of that from my manager and my players, and I agree with you entirely that. You know, the crowd did not influence how we defended that set piece. I do think that Arteta may have been sucked in a bit by Klopp. I think if you watch the incident again, Klopp is as much the instigator as anything else. And I think that he, of all managers, who has a kind of... a demonstrative manner and a very clear relationship with the crowd and a clear sense of trying to use the crowd to manipulate events on the pitch. I mean, Klopp's right up there as a kind of conductor in that respect.
Yeah.
I do wonder if he thought me getting involved here won't be the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just watching it again here. He's looking over and then he's shouting at Arteta, what? And then he comes over himself and he like lets out a big blast of dragon air into the fourth official's face.
Yeah.
And
he goes from 0 to 100 very fast.
Exactly. And like, I get when people say you can't have one reaction without the other reaction, but it was Klopp who got the Liverpool crowd going, not Arteta.
Yeah.
And he could have done that at any point he wanted in the game with a wave of his arms or whatever it might be, or using any kind of incident. So, like,
I think he was looking for the moment, and I think he found a moment, and maybe it helped them. It's always hard to unpick that stuff, but I'm not going to have a pop at Arteta because how do I want him to respond to that? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just shrug his shoulders. And,
I mean, you get blasted for not responding. You know, you go, well, you're too passive on the sideline, or when are people gonna stick up for each other? You like, if you want to foster a sense of what's the word he keeps using? Unity. But if you want to foster a sense of us against them as well, things like this happen in football. So I'm not gonna criticize Arteta for that. I mean, there are other things you can criticize him for, but not that. You know, it's something we're accused of is being too soft and too passive, and we're too easy, and we don't respond when, you know, we get a bit of a kicking or whatever. So when we do, or, you know, it's perceived that we've had a bit of a kicking and someone reacts, we can't criticize for that.
No, I agree. But then what about the goal itself then?
Well, I think it's a clumsy kind of free kick to give away. I think
is it Aubameyang chasing back?
Yeah, it's not great. I mean, conceding from a set piece after we've worked that hard to stay in the game at Anfield on 39, 40 minutes.
So yeah, what seems to, I mean, there was a lot of debate on Sky about the high line, and I have to be honest, I'm not a set piece specialist. I can't really comment on the efficacy of that or not. But having set that high line, it seems to me that Partey doesn't go with Van Dijk, basically, when he runs off him. And it means Gabriel, who is on Mane at the time, has to come across because he thinks Van Dijk might get there slightly ahead of him, and it leaves Mane spare behind him.
That's
and
fair, yeah.
Yeah, and then Tomiyasu, I guess you could say, is not holding a line. Like, maybe Partey thinks they're holding a line. I don't know what's going on, but it's not great. It's not great,
no. And I think you're right to point out, it looks bad for Gabriel, but I think you're right to point out he is kind of caught there when Van Dijk runs off Partey.
Yeah. I mean, Gabriel actually, is sort of, if you look at these goals again, they don't look great for him, but a lot of the times it feels like he's trying to fix somebody else's mess. Maybe he should judge the flight of the ball better and stick with Mane, or just stick with his man. But I can understand seeing Van Dijk's free in the box and thinking, I need to try and intervene with that. Yeah, I don't know. Did you think the goalie should have saved it?
I think it's one of those where, because he gets something on it, you always feel like he should save it, but it's a powerful downward header from close range, quite close to him. I think
weirdly that makes it a bit more difficult in some ways, and it's how downward it is. I think if he saves it, we're going, bloody hell, it's another wonder save from Ramsdale.
Yeah, I mean, if he saves that, it's Gordon Banks Pele territory, that kind of a save, because he has to get down, get a hand on it, get it up. I think he did plenty in the game, and I wouldn't blame him at all for that goal. Maybe, on the second goal, but again, that's a bit harsh.
I think if I had quibbles with his performance, I think he was obviously one of the only Arsenal players to emerge with credit from the game, but I think it would be more the handling. His reactions are brilliant when he parries stuff and he gets up to make the blocks. He did that like 3 or 4 times in the game, but sometimes you're like, if you hold it in that position, you probably don't need to do that. But I think that would be nitpicking, because without him, I think the scoreline would have been substantially worse.
Let's talk about the second goal, because clearly there's a big mistake by Nuno.
Just before that, can I talk about the 5 minutes before that, basically?
Yeah.
Because Arsenal start the second half and it's 1-0, but there's reasons for encouragement from an Arsenal perspective. There's been a couple of breakaways where Saka's kind of nearly found something on the edge of the box, but not quite. We're still in the game, crucially. And I say this honestly not to pick on a young player, but Sambi Lokonga in the first 5 minutes of the second half has a diabolical 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It was like when Abue came on that time and had to get subbed off. He just completely went to pieces. And I guess that can happen with a young player.
Yeah. I did wonder about that, because I have to say, I thought in the first half, he had worked quite well with Nuno. I thought he looked calm and under some pressure when in possession, when we were trying to play it out from the back. I thought he looked pretty good. But you're right, that whatever happened to him after half-time, it all went wrong.
Yeah, and honestly, I detail this not to string him up or have a go at him or anything like that. But 48th minute, Arsenal actually started the half okay, right? So they went long from kickoff and they made some territory. And there was a moment where Smith Rowe came central and played a really nice through ball that almost found Aubameyang in on goal, but was cut out. 48th minute, Sambi's on the edge of the box and he gives possession away, sloppy ball. And keeper has a go at him. That's 48 minutes. 30 seconds later, we've got a throw-in. Nuno gives it to him. He passes it straight out for a throw-in. 49th minute, he gives it away again. Oxlade-Chamberlain gets a shot. 50th minute, he plays a miscued back pass to Gabriel. They get a chance. There's another one 30 seconds later where he misses an interception. It's just a player who just needs, I don't know, a timeout, needs something. And unfortunately, that sort of skittishness, I think, kind of infected Arsenal a little bit. And he was actually going to come off even before the second goal, I think. They'd
made that decision, yeah.
He just was not there. And it's really, I'm really empathetic to it. It's a big game and you miscue a pass and then it's a nightmare scenario with Liverpool hounding you and on you. But I do think that unfortunately that put a big dent in our sort of foothold in the game.
Yeah, it certainly contributed because it allowed Liverpool to build some pressure. And then we saw the mistake from Nuno. And I think the mistake that he made affected him too. He gave the ball away quite a bit. And I wonder if maybe the Partey situation was the reason why he didn't come off. I just wonder if at 2-0, maybe Tierney for Nuno might have been a pretty decent substitution
I was
to
waiting
make.
for that change.
Yeah. I was looking for that as well. But on that second goal, I know that we're talking about Nuno and the misplaced pass. It can happen. Young player. Hopefully he learns from that. Ben White went to ground a little bit quickly. Ramsdale
went to ground. Yeah.
Got sat down. I think you need to look at Thomas Partey.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you've got the goal or...
I haven't spotted that. I can probably try and find it. Tell me anyway while I have a look.
Basically, as the pass is played inside from Nuno, I think he's looking to play it to Partey. Jota picks up the ball, cuts inside, and Partey just kind of stops. He doesn't go with Jota. Maybe he wouldn't have got there, but maybe just a bit of pressure might have helped. And I didn't notice this until I watched it again, because obviously you're looking at the mistake, you're looking at Ben White going to ground, etc., etc. But I do wonder if Partey could have done a bit more there. He just seemed to look at it and switch off.
Well, again, I actually think, yeah. I mean, listen, it's Tavares' error. It's very clear on that. It's a bad pass. It's a shame because what he does before it is really good. He runs into the channel with Trent Alexander-Arnold, shoulders him off the ball, he's driving up the field. I do think when he tucks it inside, I do think both central midfielders are kind of on their heels a bit and not really moving forward, and that's part of the issue. But I also have to say that it's a brilliant take from Jota. I mean, I think it's an impudent finish. Maybe it's made a bit too easy for him, but it takes real composure to do that. And it reminded me a little bit, actually, of kind of, was it Mesut Ozil against Ludogorets, like just sitting people down.
A little bit,
yeah.
But it's just very easy looking for Jota. He just needs to come inside a couple of times.
That's true, but I don't know how many players we've got who would do that.
Yeah, no, that is true. I'm not taking anything away from the goal itself, other than I don't like it because it happened against us, and I
it's
think
51st minute,
and
it's like very difficult. The game then is,
and then look, we made the sub. Maitland-Niles came on, and I did wonder if Tierney would come on for Tavares, but I think Partey's fitness issues, perhaps, and knowing that he wasn't going to get 90 minutes out of Lacazette, and maybe needed to make a change to go for it or to try and get something from the game. But I mean,
they probably weren't planning to bring Lokonga off on 51 minutes.
No.
It was just kind of a case of having to get him out of there. And suddenly 3 subs doesn't feel that many. When you've been sort of forced into one, it does limit your options.
Almost like an injury sub, I guess. So look, at 2-0, I mean, what were you looking for from Arsenal at 2-0? Because I suppose I was thinking, look, it is 2-0. Maybe we can try and go for it a little bit. Maybe, we can bring on an attacking player and see if we can create something. And I think there was a chance for Aubameyang, a really, really good pass from Lacazette into Aubameyang. I think Alisson made a good save, but I'm not sure the finish was particularly strong. It felt a bit weak of an effort from Aubameyang. Yeah,
it's not his best angle. It's a good pass. That was clearly a planned thing. Like Lacazette dropped out to the right. He almost played that pass earlier in the half and it got cut out. Exactly the same. So it's clearly something they were looking to do. I mean, Alisson's very good in one-on-ones as well. I thought that was a half chance, really. I mean, I think it's a difficult finish with the ball not having much pace on it, etc. I think we've got a bit of a problem when we start Lacazette and Aubameyang, in that it feels like we don't have a good striker to bring on.
I know what you mean.
I think that's an issue. Like, I was kind of looking at it thinking, like, well, where we're about to bring... I know we've got Pepe, and maybe we'll come on to him as someone who's just not getting a kick at the present time. But, when Lacazette comes off and Odegaard comes on, you kind of feel like you're taking goals out of the 11.
Yeah, even if Lacazette doesn't really score. So there is that element to it as well. But I know exactly what you mean. You're taking a senior striker off and you're not even replacing like for like in a way, because they're different players. They're different kinds of players. So you're trying to play in a different way. Whether that makes you more or less potent is up for debate, you know? But
I think if we had, the thing is, like, of course, we'd love to go after it. We'd love to chase the game. Funnily enough, I think if that second goal is kind of the end of it and Arsenal lose 2-0, I think even that slightly changes the complexion and the tone of the result. I think those extra 2 goals were painful. And I think in some ways they were a consequence of Arsenal not quite knowing if they were going for the game or not. Because if you watch those last 2 goals, Tomiyasu, who we talk about as kind of a defensive fullback or the third centre-half almost in the system.
Nowhere.
He's very, very high on both goals.
I think if we're going to talk about inexperience on the pitch, which I think was a factor in how this game went, we also maybe have to talk about inexperience on the sideline. And maybe Mikel Arteta not managing the game quite as well as he could have from the sideline, because, 2-0, nobody wants to lose 2-0. Nobody wants to lose at all. But 2-0, I'm not going to say it's respectable, but 4-0 is very, very far from respectable. And it raises long-standing doubts, doesn't it? If you're saying before this game, we understand there's a gulf. We know there's a gap in quality. We know there's a gap in maturity. Liverpool are a better team than we are. Liverpool are a better team than most teams in the world right now. So we get that, but we want to measure ourselves. We want to measure our progress against them. And when you've gone there and been beaten 5-1 and 3-0 and 4-1, etc., you want to see if you've made progress. And a 4-0 result or 4-0 scoreline, even if you're looking for positives, makes it very difficult to do that, because it's the same. It feels like the same. And I just wonder if at 2-0, rather than saying, okay, we've got to go for it. I mean, he said we lost our compactness, whatever it was. We left spaces, and if you leave spaces, Liverpool punish you. Well, maybe 60 minutes isn't the moment to go hell for leather against Liverpool. Maybe you consolidate at 2-0, you stick in, you keep it at 2-0 until there's sort of 10, 15 minutes to go, and then maybe you have a go. I don't know. It just felt like some of the experience that we talk about on the pitch was matched with the way the manager dealt with it off the pitch as well.
I think it was both. I really do. I think that there were individual decisions that were made that were probably not the wisest, and I think ultimately you're looking to your manager to be the person who kind of curbs those instincts and exerts some control. Doing that from a touchline in a full Anfield ain't easy, I accept.
Yeah, but this is I guess a lot of that would be training ground stuff to an extent, when you talk about game states and when you prepare for certain game states. Like, what happens if this is the scenario, and that is not necessarily an unlikely scenario when you go to Anfield. You know what I mean? No. So it's about getting that message onto the pitch. I
think so, yeah. I mean, I accept no one wants to bring negativity into it, but I'd be very surprised if being 2-0 down to Liverpool was not one of the scenarios, permutations you considered going into the game. But yeah, it was curious, actually, the degree to which, if you said what was good about Arsenal's performance in the first half, I think you would have said, well, they weren't scintillating on the ball, but shape, structure, organisation, commitment, those things were pretty solid in that first period, and they really came apart at the seams somewhat in the second. And I think it was down to individuals slightly chasing the game and the manager not having a grip on that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know how much more of the game needs analysis, to be honest. I know we brought on Odegaard for Lacazette, and what was the final sub?
Was
there a final sub?
So Lokonga, Odegaard. El Neni came on.
Oh, yeah. And then he came on for... I mean, that's completely irrelevant.
Yes, because Partey came off. But yeah, I think... No, I mean, listen, they killed us with the third and fourth goal. They've got the quality to do that. I thought there was some odd... I think Nuno, for example, on the third goal should stick with Salah, but he goes towards the ball.
Yeah.
On both, it's really interesting to look at Tomiyasu's position, how high he is. After the fourth one, he sort of nearly gets back to Minamoto. And if you see, like, in the goal mouth, I think Ramsdale was less than pleased with where Tomiyasu's been.
Yeah.
And it does sting. I mean, it must have stung him, I guess, to make that many saves and concede 4 goals. Kind of a weird afternoon. And yeah, it is a shame because it in the kind of annals of history, that I think that performance and that result rather will be looked at and kind of just grouped with all the other heavy defeats. And personally, I think in the first half there were reasons for encouragement and reasons to believe it might be different this time. But people will have differing views on that, I suspect.
Well, sure. It's like I said, it's about trying to measure your progress. I think where this game sits for me is like, okay, we're not really capable of dealing with a team like Liverpool, and we've got our own problems which can exacerbate or highlight some of the quality that Liverpool have. You know, that lack of organisation, lack of compactness in the second half that we talked about. And those are things you can work on. You know, if I'm looking at it, if I'm trying to be positive about this, I'm going, well, look, this is the kind of game, the kind of atmosphere, the kind of intensity that a lot of these players won't have experienced before. Like Sambi, I'm sure he's played in big games in Belgium, but you know, Liverpool at Anfield, you know, there aren't many teams in Belgium as good as Liverpool. Same for Tomiyasu, same for Nuno. You know, these are young guys who hopefully can learn from this game. And now it's about how much we allow this game to impact us. You know what I mean? So there was always going to be a setback. There was always going to be a bump in the road. There was always going to be a defeat. And the question now is, how well can the team respond? Like, can they put this behind them? I'm not saying they have to ignore this or forget about it, because they do have to learn from this game. But how well can they respond in the next game? The next game, I think, couldn't really be any more kind when you're playing Newcastle at home. I'm not taking anything for granted, but if you were to pick a fixture, this is probably one of the ones that you would pick. You know, a team like Newcastle at home where you can really try and bounce back. So
they can't defend Newcastle at all. I mean, they conceded 3 at home to Brentford this week, so it should be a kind fixture, really. I think it's an interesting question, that degree of, like, as fans, it's our prerogative if we choose to compartmentalise this result or not. I kind of think as a player, I sort of hope they do. That's not to say I hope they don't ever come back to it and they don't learn from it, but I hope they're able to sort of go, well, you know, we are still the people who went unbeaten for however many games and, you know, won these games. I sort of, you hope their confidence isn't bowed by it.
Yeah, like you don't want one result to completely flip the switch from, okay, this is quite positive and encouraging, to completely negative. You know, you can't allow that to happen. And I think when you look at the Premier League table, we're in 5th place, which is a decent place to be in. There has been good stuff in the last couple of months, but as Arteta said, we haven't done anything. And while the Liverpool result on its own won't undo the positivity of the last couple of months and that little run that we went on, the Liverpool game plus the Newcastle game plus the United game plus the Everton game might cast that in a new light, if you know what I mean. And we can't allow that to happen. We really have to be able to respond. Like, you can talk about inexperience, you can talk about mistakes, you can talk about those kind of things, the learning process, a young team playing together. All of those things are completely valid. But at the same time, you have to show that you can learn quickly and not just sort of go make the same mistakes over and over again. So
I agree with that. I for me, this game provided real clarity in a way, because I think it's obvious that the top three teams in this league are on a different level to everybody else. I know, West Ham can beat them and they'll have their days where they don't win games, but I really think that's kind of a mini league unto its own. I think that Arsenal's job is to try and be the best of the rest. And to be honest, off the back of this game, I still think that's possible, or at least to be in the mix for it and thus get European qualification, which has to be the aim this season. I think my memory might be playing tricks, but I said this in my post-match video, but I seem to recall the kind of young Wenger teams of the post-Emirates era having some fairly humbling scorelines away from home to big teams, but their skill was that they were able to pretty much beat everybody else. In that run, that 10-game unbeaten run, we kind of were flat-track bullies. And the reality is, if we can be flat-track bullies, we'll probably be in the top six.
Yeah, that's a great point. That improvement that we need to make and have to make against the top teams may come at a later stage, but if in the meantime you can beat these the other teams in and around you and the ones in the bottom half of the table, then you put yourself in pretty decent position to finish somewhere close to where you want to finish.
Yeah, I remember loads of games where it was like, they're men against boys, and Arsenal don't know they don't have enough experience, they don't have enough leaders, but they'd still beat West Brom and Villa and everybody else and be in the top four.
Sorry, there was a thing I saw, a post on a website called Planet Football, and it was the Premier League Big Six, in inverted commas, head-to-head table since Mikel Arteta joined Arsenal. Liverpool are top of that table with 37 points. This is games between the Big Six, obviously. Manchester City second on 33 points. Chelsea third on 29 points. Arsenal fourth on 23 points. United 21 points. Tottenham 20 points. So there is something, we have had a decent record against the bigger teams, and that was something that Arteta actually focused on a bit, I think, when he came in first, to make us more competitive in those games. It seems to have gone a little bit too far the other way at the moment, so we do have to get that back. Yeah,
and I think he was trying to do something different at that point. I think he was setting the team up in a very specific way. If you think back to the FA Cup run, or we beat Liverpool in that period at the Emirates Stadium as well, really sitting off them and trying to hit them on the break. And I think we're trying to evolve the team, but in doing so we've opened ourselves up to a certain degree of risk, and those risks hurt us the other day. But it's the United game and the Everton game will feel
huge,
big, because Crystal Palace was a disappointing result in isolation, but really it's not that interesting to think of games in isolation, and you've got to think of them in terms of sort of groups or runs of performances. So, and that Crystal Palace draw, ultimately we were like, well, it was okay because we won at Leicester or whatever it might be. I think if we look at kind of Liverpool, Newcastle, United, Everton as a little mini group of four, and say, what would be acceptable as a points tally from that run of games, I think that's maybe a better way to think about it. And I think that will also tell us a lot more about where this team is, because the United are much more of a direct competitor for us at this point than Liverpool.
Well, look, plenty ahead. Like we said, Newcastle coming up next, and then those two games, Everton and Man United, and Everton away in the space of 4 days. It's a Thursday, Monday vibe going on there. So that will certainly make it a bit interesting. Okay, look, we've got plenty to get through in part two, loads of questions as well. So we will take a little break here, come back with those and more in part two right after this. Welcome back to the Arsecast Extra. This is part 2 of the show where we answer questions that you send to us on Twitter at Gunnerblog and at Arseblog, and also on the Arseblog Discord chat server, which you get access to if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon. Just very quickly picking up on something that you mentioned towards the end of the first half. There was a question here from good old Arsenal, who's at Aleppo Morano. I don't know how to pronounce that. Aleppo Morano. Anyway, he's on Twitter and he says, "Good day, gentlemen. Brighton managed to score 2 against Liverpool at Anfield after going 2-0 down. Shouldn't we put ourselves to a higher standard and not give too much leeway to the team for ending the game with that 4-0 scoreline?" I saw quite a number of, comments and opinions about this. Like, Arsenal got beaten 4-0, but what about West Ham? They won 3-2, and Brighton, they were 2-0 down, and they came back to 2-2 and could have won it, etc., etc. So, I mean, where do you sit on that kind of thinking?
I understand it. I see the point, certainly. I think that it's really difficult to compare games. Like, I do think every game is different. Watford beat United 4-1 the other day, and we beat Watford 1-0. So should we beat United 5-1? Like, it feels like a sort of false equivocation sometimes.
Yeah.
I also think that, for example, with West Ham, like, that West Ham team is not an inexperienced team. Like, that is a team of men for the most part, and I think that counts in their favour. But yeah, equally I get it. Like, Liverpool are not invulnerable, and defensively they have struggled at times this season. But I think you would have to say offensively we have struggled. So we're perhaps not the best team to put pressure on a vulnerable defence. We don't do that against many teams.
That's a really good point. That is a really good point. I don't know if we have any questions about this. Do we? I don't know if I have questions about goals and chances and things like that, but
probably the XG. Well, the XG is coming for us.
Well, look, that's fine and dandy. Does that remain? I mean, for me, it remains a huge worry that we just don't take enough shots, score enough goals, make enough chances. And I know this is the most basic analysis of all time, but I do worry about our ability to get where we think we need to go while this remains a fairly fundamental issue. So without it being a question, I guess just a quick bit on that.
I think it is. I think it is a really big topic. And do you know? I saw a great clip today of Ralph Rangnick, everyone's favourite coach they don't really know anything about. And he was talking about when he was at Red Bull Salzburg and they played a 4-2-3-1. And he was basically saying they realised they basically had 2 30-goal strikers in Austrian football.
Right.
They had Sadio Mane in that team as well, actually, playing sort of off the wing, or as like a number 10. And they changed their system, essentially. They went to like a 4-2-2-2. It was an innovative move in Austrian football. 2 central midfielders, 2 wide number 10s, and 2 centre forwards, and had an amazing success with that. And the reason I found it interesting and relevant is just I thought it's a great principle to say, the players with goals in them. It's so simple. It's like, these guys will score goals. Therefore, we must construct a team that includes them. And Arsenal do not have the luxury of having a problem like that. I mean, I think Pepe is kind of the Pepe discussion. I've got another question about it in a moment, but I think that is part of it. If you've got a guy if you don't score goals and you've got a guy who scores goals, do you have to get him in the team, or do you have to just get more goal scorers? I know that there's a big discussion of like system, and does Arteta's system get the most out of these attackers? And that is all valid. But I would also say that you look at Liverpool and you look at us and you look at their two wide forwards, Mane and Salah, and you look at Smith Rowe and Saka, and you can see basically a decade of development separates them, and also probably about 20 goals a season. And, people say playing with young centre-backs is going to cost you, and they're right about that. But they don't say often enough, playing with young forwards can cost you too. And people like Anelka or Messi, guys who come in and do it at 17, I think they are the exception that proves the rule. I think for the most part, you have to wait until later in a guy's development for them to become regular, reliable goal scorers. And so part of me just worries, like, if you want to play Smith Rowe and you want to play Saka, are you just, in your front four, are you just accepting that there's going to be a slight shortfall, numbers-wise?
Maybe. I mean,
sounds harsh, given how well Smith Rowe's done.
Well, exactly. He's been scoring. Saka hasn't really scored this season. I think he's one Premier League goal. And I understand why Mikel Arteta picks Bukayo Saka, and I'm not being critical in any way of Bukayo Saka here. I think he's an amazing player and he's going to develop into something really, really brilliant. And I understand why a coach who's a bit more structural, like Arteta, would pick Saka over Pepe in terms of how he wants his team to construct their football and their attacking moves. But at the same time, in leaving out Pepe, you've got a guy who was involved in, 20-odd goal involvements last season. I mean, there was a couple of questions. One from Eddie Longbridge, who said, our goal difference is very bad. I had a look into this and realised we don't score enough goals. Good man, Eddie. He said, should Pepe be fitted into the lineup more, or is his time coming to an end? And on the Discord, Andrew the Hinkley Gooner says, hi Andrew and James, I'd like to try Pepe in place of Lacazette. I've long been an advocate for playing Pepe as a second striker. His pressing is underrated, as is his heading from goal kicks. He is lethal from around the edge of the box and a bigger goal threat than Lacazette. What do you think? Lacazette has been good, but he's leaving and he's only a 60-minute player. So how do you solve a problem like Pepe?
Well, I think we all agree that well, maybe we don't. I think that Saka is better on the right than Pepe is. I always find it interesting that we always talk about how isolated Pepe looks in that position, and you seem to never say that of Saka. And I think that tells you a little bit about the way they play and the way they're able to make the most of that position. Obviously, moving a player into like a new role is always... feels like a bit of a throw of the dice. We spoke about Kolo Touré in central midfield as kind of this mythical thing that we just needed to unlock. I do wonder, though, about Pepe in this Lacazette role. And as I said in part one, I do have this feeling sometimes that when we start with Aubameyang and Lacazette, it's like there's a player missing who can come on for one of those guys and be a threat. And I do wonder if he might be the closest thing we have to that. So yeah, I'd like to see it, but I can't. I have to be honest, I don't think that will happen. Okay, but how much do you think I mean, it feels a bit, with Pepe, and I'm not saying he can't make a contribution, but it feels a bit like if you're looking to Pepe for the solution, it's sort of like people saying on Saturday, you know what would have made a real difference to Arsenal? Granit Xhaka. If we'd had Granit Xhaka at Anfield on Saturday, would have been... And it's like... Well, just you wait till we get to the Thomas Partey question.
Well, we're getting
I'll be
there.
Getting out my drum, my Granit Xhaka-shaped drum.
We're getting there. But look, it feels a bit like that the solution is a problem that you've forgotten you had, in a way, if that makes sense.
But you know also... What I mean? When the window's closed and you've got games, you've got to work with what's available.
I agree. I'm not saying that. I accept that. You've got to work with what you have. And I think part of what worries me is I feel like some of the issues are just too fundamental to the way Arteta wants to play. Like, it could be a case, James, that we get one player in, and I'm thinking something similar to what Bruno Fernandes did at Manchester United. That way, the impact he had there was incredible. He's a player I dislike, but you can't deny what he brings to that team in terms of goals, etc., that maybe there is one player, a specific type of player who could come in and maybe unlock us and give us a kind of attacking freedom or liberate this team from an attacking sense. But I'm not sure. I just feel, I don't know who it is.
Well, maybe he's on the bench.
Yeah,
we bought Martin Odegaard, didn't we?
Yeah. I mean, I would have him back in the team, to be honest, because I think we need somebody with a little more creativity and a little more craft. But it just feels like some of the attacking pieces that Arteta has, he doesn't particularly believe in. Like Pepe, we can see that there are issues there with him, right? And there have been throughout the time that he's been at the club. There have been periods where he's been good. There's been periods where he's been left out of the team, even as much as being left out of the team for a fat old guy from Chelsea last year. You know, when it was quite obvious the fat old guy was useless, he still couldn't get back in the team ahead of the fat old guy. Aubameyang is what he is. He's 32 years of age. He is what he is as a player, and we keep asking him to do things which aren't necessarily his strength. Lacazette, similarly, is not being offered a new contract. He's not part of the future. He's not part of the plans, but we're using him, etc., etc. So this idea that maybe some of the attacking pieces aren't quite what Arteta wants. At the same time, though, he has to get this team scoring goals. He has to get this team making chances. He has to maybe address issues where in the second half he can bring players on who can change a game, who can give us more attacking momentum. And I feel like I'm a bit cautious about that. I said to somebody on Twitter today, it feels, like everything's got to be just right for Arteta ball to work, if you want to call it that. You know what I mean? There isn't much room for chaos. There isn't much room for just like fucking go for it, which maybe is against the way he coaches, etc., but sometimes you need a bit of that.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. I think that structure is a big part of it. I just also think there is a personnel problem in terms of having enough goal scorers in the squad. And the thing is, I'm not even sure that my solution is like, therefore let's buy loads of goal scorers, because Saka and Smith Rowe, and Smith Rowe's already doing this to an extent, you're hoping are going to become those players. But that isn't going to be today, and it might not be tomorrow. Mm. Like, if you give Jurgen Klopp that Arsenal 11, I'm not sure it makes Saka a 20-goal player. But he needs to get there for him to be what we need him to be, and that might take time. Mm. That's sort of the conundrum. Is like how long are we prepared to wait with these guys as well? And what you can do is you can change the centre forward, you can bring in a number 10, you can add another central midfield player, and maybe that unlocks it all. But I still think there's going to be a process of kind of maturation for some of these attacking players that we're going to have to sit with. Yeah,
I mean, look, if you win a load of games 1-0, or 2-0 or 2-1 or whatever it might be, at the end of the day, you're probably going to end up in a reasonable position. It's just that the margins are so tight that you can't keep winning games by the odd goal. You know what I mean? You have to be able to control games, and I think where I also need to see something is when a game is going against us and our ability to turn that game back around in our favour. We haven't seen anywhere near enough of that as well. Mm. But
yeah, exactly. And I don't think anyone's asking for that at Anfield, but I think there are other instances, certainly. Well, what about this? I mean, you mentioned Odegaard, but Swayze Sultan on Twitter said, hi guys, what changes, if at all, would you make for the next match against Newcastle? And then P. Mohan said, is it time to give Odegaard a run in the team?
Yes. I would have Odegaard in the team ahead of Lacazette. I would have Tierney back in the team. for Newcastle?
I'd probably stick with Lokonga just because I feel like maybe you want to get that out of his system.
Yeah, maybe there's some development going on there as well, that these minutes that he's getting are going to be beneficial to him. You know what I mean?
I still feel that Maitland-Niles...
I was going to say, it feels like Lokonga is much more of part of the long-term plans than Maitland-Niles.
Certainly,
yeah. So, put the yards into him now. I mean, I wouldn't change the centre forward, I don't think, even though we do have like a load of questions, or there wasn't one question about Aubameyang. But I would play Aubameyang, but I'd make sure that I've got Odegaard in there as well. Beyond that, I don't know that I would change anything. I mean, maybe Pepe for Saka wouldn't be a huge risk in a game like that, but I think he'll play Saka. But that's about it, I think. I don't know what else I could realistically change about the team. I know people will say play Martinelli up front, but Martinelli's had a couple of games up front and hasn't been particularly impressive. What I would like to see is, if the game isn't going our way, or if the game has gone our way, those players getting a few more minutes than just sort of 6 minutes at the end or 3 minutes or whatever it might be,
Yeah, that would be good. I mean, it's tricky with sort of one game a week for these guys to get minutes and stay sharp enough to compete. I would agree with most of those changes. Definitely I'd bring Tierney in. Definitely I'd bring Odegaard in. Even if it doesn't work, I feel like this is a game where we can afford to have a look at it and, see how that helps us. I also think there is a real benefit to being able to take Aubameyang off and bring Lacazette on, or even sometimes vice versa. I just think that, you need goals from the bench too. They're the obvious ones. Maybe Maitland-Niles, but I suspect it might be Sambi. But, we shall see. Do you want to ask me about Thomas Partey?
Yeah, okay. Here's a couple of questions about Thomas Partey. West Antone says, has Thomas Partey looked like a 50 million cash up front midfielder to either of you? And on the Discord, Conrad P says, is Partey actually a worse signing than Pepe? With Pepe, we've seen flashes of brilliance and quite a few goals and assists. With Partey, we've had a few good games, many more mediocre ones, some real stinkers, and a lot of injuries. Given how good Maitland-Niles has been in that position, should we just drop Partey for Maitland-Niles like we dropped Pepe for Saka? Where do you stand?
Lots of questions like this.
Loads of questions about Thomas Partey and how his Arsenal career has gone so far.
So part of the reason I watched the game again actually was to try and understand this. And do you know what's funny? At half time in the game, I think I tweeted one thing and I said, Arsenal are doing okay, but if they're going to get anything from this game, they need more from central midfield.
Yeah, I think I said the same thing.
Yeah, and I'm very sympathetic to how difficult it is to play in central midfield against Liverpool. Like, I don't think there are many tougher tasks, especially when with Lacazette in there, you're almost outnumbered, to be honest, because he's not really a midfield player. And Liverpool really pushed Partey. Like, they were very clear. They didn't want Arsenal to play out through Partey, so there were often 3 or 4 players around him. They wanted Arsenal to go out through Tomiyasu or Tavares, and other teams do that too. Everybody, if you're preparing to face Arsenal, right, well, don't let them give it to Partey and let him turn and drive forward in the middle of the pitch. So that is part of the problem that he is encountering, but that doesn't fully explain everything, like switching off slightly on the set piece or allowing Mane to run off the back of him and Arteta having to scream at him from the touchline. Yeah. I mean, I'll do my Xhaka bit now just because I feel like it's almost like he's a bit of a dirty word, Granit Xhaka, among Arsenal fans. Like, it's almost like we really want to believe it doesn't matter that he's not there, but it matters to Partey. It might not matter to us, but I really think it matters to Partey. And that doesn't mean to say Xhaka is the only player who can work well with Partey. I mean, we saw El Neni play very well with Partey against Old Trafford. And it may be that there's somebody in the transfer market who we can bring in who can be that guy moving forward. But I think he needs a proper grown-up partner to be at his best. I just think he does. I just think that's his personality. And I think it also, when that's not the case, the opposition are allowed to focus on him so much that it's very difficult for him to be the player we want him to be.
I think that's a fair point. I think the point about it being difficult to play against Liverpool is a really good one. I had a look at the stats. I think Partey's pass completion was something in the region of 94%, so he was very tidy on the ball. It's just he didn't do a great deal with it.
But it was about getting the ball as well. Like, we couldn't get it to him enough, you know?
No, I get that. I also can see why he would benefit from a more experienced player alongside him. I understand that too. But I also think when you're a 28-year-old, £50 million signing, that there is also a degree of responsibility is not quite the right word, but you're one of the senior guys in the team. And I'm not saying he has to carry Sambi or he has to carry Maitland-Niles, which I don't think he needs to do per se. But I also feel like since he arrived, my general sense of Thomas Partey in an Arsenal shirt is very underwhelming. It is. It's that's just how I feel about it. I don't think we have seen yet what we thought we were going to get from Thomas Partey. Apart from the odd game, and there are reasons / excuses, however you want to say it. But that's part of what can make a signing underwhelming or not particularly successful. If they can't stay fit, might not be their fault, but it doesn't mean the signing is any less underwhelming. You know what I mean? And that's where I am with him now, that I really want to see more from him. I hope he can stay fit. I hope he can start to deliver, because he's a really talented player, but I haven't seen anywhere near what I thought we were going to get from Thomas Partey. Yeah,
and for all the caveats I've offered, I would agree with that. And I think people are very quick to say, well, maybe he's not quite fit. And it's like, when are we going to be able to not say that?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, honestly, it feels like he's always carrying an injury or coming back from an injury. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh there, but it does feel like it's a kind of, there's a persistent niggle there. And my heart is in my mouth watching him for when the next one might come. And I also think there's a question of kind of responsibility. Like, I made this point on Handbrake Off, so apologies to anyone who's sort of doubled up. But it's really interesting when you speak to people around the first team about leaders in the dressing room, that they'll say Aubameyang and Lacazette, the big characters, or they might say, oh, Gabriel or Ramsdale, they're kind of taking up the baton for the young guys, Tierney. It's really interesting that nobody mentions the 28-year-old, £40 million central midfielder. And I don't say this to criticise him, really. I just think that isn't who he is. He's a laid-back guy, and that can be a blessing. But I think because of the money we paid for him and because of the expectation that came with that, I think we look to him to be that, to kind of be the talisman. And that's why I say I think he needs a partner, because I'm not sure on his own he is that character. But
I mean, you can't make somebody into something they're not. You know what I mean?
No, and I think we might be slightly...
But
is the ghost of Patrick Vieira looming here? Do you know what I mean, in terms of our expectations?
I know what you mean, but at the same time, when you are one of the senior guys in a team, it feels like it should be natural. And look, I don't mean he has to go out there and bash his chest and hit the badge and all the pumping his fists.
Matthew Flamini liked pointing.
Yeah, exactly. Flamini's version of leadership didn't get us very far either, But yeah, I suppose he must know himself as well that he hasn't been.
I mean, how long has it been now? A season, coming up for a season and a half.
Yeah.
It just feels like, he's not quite got going. And when you think about the question of like, how does you assess the signing? When you think about what we paid and the age of the player, we did that wanting fast results.
Yeah.
And for various reasons, we've not had that with any great consistency.
Do you think when we signed Thomas Partey, we had envisaged him being quite as senior a figure as we need him to be, if you know what I mean? So this £50 million signing, I mean, when you buy a 28-year-old, or he was 27 at the time, you expect them to come in like £50 million, experienced international, played for Atletico Madrid, played, won the league, Champions League player, all that kind of stuff. You're buying an oven-ready player, right? But do you think we necessarily expected the age profile of the team to change quite as dramatically as it did, thereby putting a lot more responsibility on him?
Yeah, casting him into this slightly unexpected role of kind of dad to this group. Probably not. I don't think you can make any argument that this was always the plan. Otherwise, we would have done things very differently in those windows. We signed Thomas Partey in the same window we signed Willian, So I don't think we anticipated the degree and the nature of the change that would happen. No. And the thing is, he absolutely has the talent to make this conversation look very foolish in what remains of his time with Arsenal.
I hope so.
Yeah, I think he does, but it's about consistency of delivery. We all remember the game at Old Trafford where he was just absolutely astonishing, and there have been other occasions like that, but they're the
exception rather than the rule, and we need the rule to be a bit more consistent. I mean, that's the reality. Is whatever we want to talk about with Thomas Partey, we can feel that he's been underwhelming, and I think he has been, but the reality is that we need him to be better if we're going to achieve what we hope this team can achieve. Simple as that, because without midfield control, too many games are going to get away from us. Yeah,
and I really believe that Odegaard and Partey might be an important sort of connective link within this team. And I suspect that the introduction of one may help the other.
I think I said that a few weeks ago, that the way that when he does play well and the way that Partey looks to get the ball forward, I think suits Odegaard, because he's in those pockets. He's in those areas when Partey likes to play that vertical pass. Maybe that's it. But I think, we've got, Arteta's kind of stumbled into the Lacazette thing over the last couple of weeks. But, when you think about it, we've got a £50 million central midfielder and a £35 million attacking midfielder, central attacking midfielder / number 10, that we have invested heavily in, that we need to make work. And I think the sooner we give that a chance, well, I was going to say the better we'll be. We don't know if we'll be the better, but when you make those kind of purchases, you're hoping that these guys are going to become fundamental parts of your team. So,
yeah, absolutely. And I think, when Edu and Arteta sat down towards the end of the transfer window and did their little diagram of the squad and the team, they probably envisaged Thomas Partey playing in a midfield 3 or, 2+1 with Granit Xhaka and Martin Odegaard. And at the moment, he's not playing with either of them. And I think that is contributing to some of the problems that he is having. But I still think that there is responsibility on him to do more, and we're going to need more from him. There are games coming up that look tough. Old Trafford, as bad as they've been, they might be recovering by then. Everton are also on a bad run, so doubtless they'll win this weekend to turn things around just before we visit.
Of course.
And we all need him in a big way because Lokonga, Maitland-Niles, Elneny, they're the guys that we've got to pick from at the moment, and they all have strengths, and some are much more exciting than others for reasons of what they might go on and do. But clearly, the onus is on Partey in that part of the pitch.
Yep.
Pepe, that was the question. Done that one. We've done quite a lot of the ones I was going to do. If you've got any to hand, let me...
A couple of quick ones to finish because we've been going a while. Then. So, from the Discord, Mark Nellis says, what would you say an acceptable points return for our remaining 7 games of the year might be? So
wow.
Yeah. Because we did this, for the last little run where we looked at it, and I think we said maybe 18 points would have been pretty decent, and in the end we got 20. So just to sort of lay it out, the remaining 7 Premier League games of this calendar year are Newcastle at home, Man United away, Everton away, Southampton at home, West Ham at home, Leeds away, Norwich away, and Wolves away. Is that...
No, Wolves home, actually.
Wolves home. That's 8 games, actually. That's 8. So we've got points. 8 games, 24 points to play for. What do you think a reasonable return from those games would be?
Depends on your definition of reasonable. I think if we take 8 games, right? I guess I basically think we need to win 5. And it kind of doesn't really matter what happens in the rest. Like, if we win 5, we'll still be in the mix, in my opinion. So I guess that would be 15. So I'd say like 17 points. I'd say that's pretty good.
Right. So, I mean, that would have us on 35 points after 20 games.
Yeah.
Which I don't think would keep us as close to the mix as we would like.
Do you think?
Yeah.
So what do you think they need to take?
I mean, 3 more points. I'm talking about 18 from 24. Yeah. I guess it really depends on how you achieve the points as well. Like, if you get battered in one of the games and you win all the rest...
Yeah, also, like, the 3
you
points...
could go unbeaten. You could go unbeaten and have 8 points,
That's what I mean. Like, Arsenal could go to Everton and United and get 2 draws and be like, oh, we're unbeaten. That's really good. But it might be more valuable in some ways to take 3 points from one, especially if it's United.
Well, yeah, United and West Ham in particular are really interesting games. Everton, I think, is going to be tricky. United, who knows? Just who knows what you get with United?
And, frankly, Ronaldo frightens me because,
of course, the inevitability of his fucking big, thick neck fucking celebrating as he scores a goal against us is just too much.
He's been kryptonite to us in the past.
Yes.
So I worry about that one.
But Newcastle, you're looking for a win. Everton, I think we're capable of winning. Southampton,
we should be looking to win that game. Southampton, we should win as well.
West Ham, going to be a very tough game because they're a very big physical team who are playing well. But, it's one of those home games when you look at it on paper, you're going, I
think we could win that game.
Yeah. Leeds away.
They're not great this season.
They're not. Norwich away.
Norwich we should be looking to win, of course. And Wolves at home we should be looking to win.
Yeah. So it's there.
Yeah.
We'll see. Okay.
I think also when I say in the mix, it all depends what you consider the mix. I think there is a kind of underlying debate in this season of, well, is 4th up for grabs and are Arsenal a realistic contender for 4th, which is a bit of a sort of surprise conversation because I think most people assumed top 6 is the best we can hope for and that United, with the money they've spent, would be a nailed-on team for top 4.
Yeah.
That's not the case, and so Arsenal are sort of being assessed as a potential top 4 team. In my head, I still think top 6 is probably what we're going for, but some would say that's
I think that's more reasonable than top 4, even though we're only 3 points away from the top 4. I just, for all the things we've talked about, this team, its development, the lack of goals, etc., I find it hard to think that we'll keep up with that. But obviously I hope we do, and it's much nicer to be in the position where, it's a possibility, however vague that might be.
It would be great.
Yeah,
it would be fantastic to jump back into the Champions League straight away. That'd be brilliant.
Okay, final question here. It comes from the Discord. It comes from Bouncy Sean. And he says, rate Josh Kroenke's dancing at an audience with Adele. I don't know if you've seen the clip. Have you seen the clip?
I've seen like a 2-second clip.
That's all
I
there
saw
is.
some of an audience with Adele, but I didn't see the Josh Kroenke bit live, but someone sent it to me. I mean, he's having a lovely time. I don't know. He's got the best seat in the house.
What is going on with this? I took a screenshot of it. It's bizarre. It's like, the guy who does the amazing political pictures, Cold War Steve. It's a bit like that in its surrealness, because Josh Kroenke is there, front and centre, with Samuel L. Jackson to one side of him.
Yeah.
Then there's Stormzy. And
everybody was there. It was
Gareth
crazy.
Southgate is in the background. There's probably loads of famous people that I don't recognise because I'm just too old and don't.
Out with famous people, yeah.
And
but Josh Kroenke's not really famous in this country, so
what's going on? What's like the
money buys you everything, I guess.
Yeah, but what's the connection there? Like, how does Josh Kroenke get invited to an Adele thing? Like, do they have a personal relationship? Hello, Josh, it's me, Adele. Come to my party. I'll sing a song for you. I don't know any Adele songs. Oh, I do know one song. It's that one that sounds like Vic Reeves.
Which one's that?
Vic Reeves doing the cabaret singer. You know that one?
Sure.
I don't remember what it's called.
Well, maybe there's a whole episode of Arsenal All or Nothing, which is about Josh Kroenke trying to get into the Adele gig. Maybe that instead of showing Arsenal's 4-0 defeat at Anfield, they're just going to show highlights of Josh Kroenke's dancing at the Adele concert.
Bizarre. And she's a Spurs fan as well. You told me she's a Spurs fan.
She's a big Spurs fan.
Dear, oh dear, oh dear.
I know.
Dear, oh dear. Fold the club, etc., etc., etc. I mean, the thing about it is, Spurs fans and music just doesn't work, does it? Chaz and Dave, Phil Collins, all the other ones. Fan?
Yeah. Is Phil Collins a Spurs fan?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I read that. I
feels like something you've created in your mind to, I mean, it makes sense.
Phil Collins, Spurs fan. I'm just Googling that. Music star Phil Collins helps Tottenham legend, I don't know which the legend is, Jimmy Greaves, with a sizable donation. But yeah, I'm pretty sure Phil Collins is a Spurs fan, which tells you a lot.
Wow.
All right. Well, let's leave it there. We do have a big game on Sunday against Newcastle. We will preview that later in the week.
Saturday,
12:30. Yes.
Correct.
Sorry. We'll talk about that a bit later in the week. For now, though, we'll leave it there. As ever, thank you very much indeed for listening, and we will catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye.